Assalamu alaikum, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to the channel. Happy Ramadan to everybody. I hope your Ramadan is going very well, and I hope your life is going very well. You just bought a house here in Turkey. Congratulations, you finally did it. I'm really happy for you. It was a major decision for you, obviously. It was a major decision for your family. You had to, weigh all the pros and cons of buying a house in Turkey and all that. So you've done your math and it worked out, and you just bought yourself a new residential property in Turkey. Uh, of course, it's a major investment, right? And you want a return on that investment probably. Um, what's a good way to take advantage of that investment? Of course, the number one way to make money off of your new property is to lease it out, right? You want to get some money for that property. uh, but there's a problem. uh, as you probably know by now, laws in Turkey sometimes don't make much sense, and especially when it comes to the law that governs the relationship between landlords and tenants. And you, as a prospective new landlord, need to know the law and kind of try to manipulate it to your favor a little bit. Here in Turkey, we have a major problem. Uh, the law favors the tenant a lot more than it favors the landlord. And I'll give you an example. Here in Turkey, uh, of course, here I'm talking about residential leases, not the commercial ones. You sign a lease with your tenant, and for example, for 1 year, and that lease renews every year. Let's say that there's an expiration date on that lease for 2 years. Okay, so 2 years from now, the lease will expire. So you've rented your property out for 2 years. Uh, Here's a problem: that lease will actually renew every year for 10 years straight, even though there's an agreement, a mutual agreement between you and the tenant saying that the lease will expire after 2 years. That is not valid by Turkish law. Turkish law actually overrides that lease, says that, oh, this paragraph is illegal, so it kind of like erases that paragraph, and then it makes the lease renew. And of course, this is an advantage to your tenant, because then that lease gets renewed on the same rental amount as before. So in Turkey, as you probably know, we have a big problem with inflation. Like last year in 2022, I believe the annual inflation was around 70%, more or less. So we're talking about a huge amount of inflation. Some people say actually it's even higher. But the problem is, last year the Turkish government passed a law that forbids landlords from raising the rent more than 25%, despite the country having 7% inflation rate. And this is a major problem, especially if you're a landlord with just one property and your whole livelihood depends on the income from that one property. So imagine, I mean, it would create such a horrible problem, right? So your whole, your single source of income is limited to a 25% rise, whereas the inflation is at 70, 80, 90%. Of course, that puts you in a 40 to 60% deficit vis-a-vis the inflation. How do you remedy that? How do you increase the rent on your existing tenants? And if your existing tenants don't agree to raising the rent, how do you evict them? How do you make them move out? Uh, you do that basically by this thing right here, okay? That is the only legal way of doing this. It's called Tahliye Taahhutnamesi, obviously. And what it is it's basically a letter of intent to move out on a specific date. On a specific date. You basically make your tenant sign this, and I'm looking at a copy of it right here. You basically make your tenant sign this, along with the lease agreement, and this basically protects you from that annually renewing lease agreement, and it looks after your interests basically. You can make, using this document, you can make your tenant leave at any time you like, actually. It gives you a huge power, right? It protects you against your tenants, against the Turkish law. But there is a few things that you have to watch out for this thing to be valid and usable in a court of law. So let's go ahead and quickly go over those things. First of all, it has to be voluntary. You cannot actually force your tenant to sign a lease agreement. Sign a Tahliye Taahhutnamesi. The lease agreement is of course voluntary as well, but so is the Tahliye Taahhutnamesi. It has to be number two. So number one, it has to be voluntary. Number two, Tahliye Taahhutnamesi, the letter of promise to move out, to vacate, has to be written. Okay, so no verbal Tahliye Taahhutnamesi. It has to be written down. It has to be a written document. By the way, I'm going to be including a copy of this Tahliye Taahhutnamesi that I'm holding. I'm going to be including a copy of it as a PDF in the description, so you can go ahead and download it, print it out, and use it to just fill it out and hand it to your tenants to sign and date and everything. Okay, courtesy of moi, Hassan, your Turkish realtor. Okay, so number one, it has to be voluntary. Number two, it has to be written, so no verbal Tahliye Taahhutnamesi. It has to be, it doesn't have to be notarized, by the way, okay? It has to be written, but it doesn't have to be notarized. Optional, it's optional. You can get it notarized as well. It will make the document more powerful, but it's not required. Also optional, if you're not getting it notarized, you might actually consider having a witness sign it as well. That way, if there's a disagreement about the validity of the document in the future, you can actually call on your witness to prove your point of view. Okay, so it has to be written, no verbal Tahliye Taahhutnamesi. Notary public is optional and witness is optional, but highly recommended, especially the witness. I recommend it. Of course, it has to be signed by your tenant. This is a document that your tenant actually, this is a letter that is given to you by your tenant, okay, to you, to the landlord. So it has to be signed by your tenant, or it has to be signed by your tenant's legal representative, like their lawyer or whoever they've authorized to do these kinds of transactions on their behalf. If your tenant, this is a very crucial point, okay? If your tenant is a married person, his or her husband or wife or partner, I'm not judging, they have to sign this as well, okay? It has to, if it's a single person, then just that person has to sign this. Of course, it has to match the name that's on the lease as well. You cannot sign a letter of promise to vacate for somebody else. It has to be signed by the person whose name appears on the lease. But it has to be it has to be signed by the tenant, of course, and their wife or husband or partner. It has to have a move out date. Okay, it has to have a move out date, as you can see to the right of me. And it has to have a signature date, a document date. This is the second. The first one, the move out date, is of course the date that they're promising to move out of the property that you're renting to them, and the signature date is the date that they're signing the document. They're signing the Tahliye Taahhutnamesi and giving it to you. There's another requirement here. It has to be signed at least 7 days after they sign the lease. Okay, and this one's kind of important because in the past people have objected to signed and dated letters of promise to vacate because they can basically tell the courts that, oh, my landlord has illegally forced me to sign this so that I could move out. So in order to be able to move in, I signed this just to be able to rent the property. So remember, this has to be a voluntary document. So you cannot force your prospective tenants to actually give you Tahliye Taahhutnamesi. So that's why courts have required landlords to obtain this letter from their tenants voluntarily, and it has to be at least 7 days after they've signed the lease agreement. Okay, this is very important because this might actually void the Tahliye Taahhutnamesi. And finally, the Tahliye Taahhutnamesi can only be valid for 1 year. So if your tenant has signed the Tahliye Taahhutnamesi today, that move out date written on the Tahliye Taahhutnamesi has to be within 365 days of today. Okay, so those are the important points. And if this is correctly done, this document gives you huge powers as the landlord. Okay, it basically protects you against your tenants, locking you in for 10 years straight at a very low rent, and it protects you against Turkish law, because remember, Turkish law protects the tenants and they kind of mess with the landlords, unfortunately. So as an intelligent and cunning landlord, you want your tenants to sign this document and give you a letter of promise to move out. So let's go ahead and kind of look at what makes up a Tahliye Taahhutnamesi together. Okay, so way on top, and you can see right here, way on top, of course, it's got your information, the information of the landlord. This is, of course, your first name, your last name. If you get a middle initial, include it as well. Your Turkish ID number, okay, and your phone number will suffice. Make sure that all the information here is correct, of course. Right underneath the landlord section, you got mecurun adresi. This is the address of the property that you're leasing out. This is the address that you're renting out. Make sure that it matches the one on the lease. It's very important. Under that, you've got your tenant's information, your tenant's name and last name, your tenant's Turkish ID number. Now, these Turkish ID numbers might actually be foreign ID numbers as well. So if, let's say, you have a Japanese or Korean or Russian, American, whoever, what have you, person staying as your tenant, you can put their passport numbers on there as well, and those will be valid as well. Just make sure that it shows whatever country that they're citizens of as well. Of course, include their phone numbers so that you've got some way to contact them. Now, if you're, like I said before, if your tenant is a married person, you have to have their spouse's information right underneath there as well. So the tenant's name has to match the one on the lease, and their spouse's name has to match the one on the lease. Even though they're not really required to put their spouse's name on the lease agreements, like residential lease agreements. They have to put their spouse's name on the Tahliye Taahhutnamesi. Okay, because in the past, tenants have challenged landlords in the courts and said that their spouses would say something like, "Look, my husband signed this, but I didn't know that he signed this. This affects me as much as it affects my husband. It affects our children as well. So I'm vehemently against this, against our family moving out. It's going to affect our family negatively. We cannot move out right now. My kids go to school, and I can't really move their school right now. Yada yada yada." So that's why you want to have your that's why you want to have your tenant's husband or wife sign the Tahliye Taahhutnamesi as well. Okay, it's very important for this document to be valid. And right underneath there, you have a term called Tahliye Tarihi. Now, this is a very crucial date. This is the move out date. Okay. Now, on some Tahliye Taahhutnamesi documents, tenants or landlords agree to leave this blank, and that's called the blank Tahliye Taahhutnamesi. But I'm not really going to go into details of that. I'll probably make another video about that. Actually, this topic, this Tahliye Taahhutnamesi topic, is a huge topic, and in this video, we're just going to be kind of covering what it is and how you can use it and what it does for you. So, but in the future, I'll make more videos about this topic where we delve into like how you can challenge a valid Tahliye Taahhutnamesi and how you can use it, how you can use the powers granted to you by Tahliye Taahhutnamesi to make your tenant move out and all that. Okay. So under the Tahliye Tarihi, under the move out date, we have the area where you can put in the information of your witness, and I highly recommend that you put in witness for this. That way, you kind of you grant your Tahliye Taahhutnamesi a little more powers, so that it becomes harder with a witness. It becomes harder for your tenant to challenge your Tahliye Taahhutnamesi, okay, in a court of law. So because it would be 2 against 1 versus 1 versus 1. So and your witness will in most cases be your like a lot of realtors like myself or real estate advisors, they will most likely agree to bear witness to the signing of this. You can check with your specific realtor, but you can also have your spouse or your friend or somebody who'd be okay with bearing witness. I mean, this doesn't really put any like legal conditions on them. They're basically saying that they're witnessing your tenants giving you this letter. Okay, that's basically what they're agreeing to on here. So under the section where your witness would put in their information, you have the text of the letter of the Tahliye Taahhutnamesi. And like I said, I'm going to be including the PDF for this, so you can just copy and paste, or you can just use the PDF as is. In this text, your tenant basically agrees to moving out on the Tahliye Tarihi date, the move out date, and if they don't, then they're agreeing to giving you full rights to like evict them, and they're also agreeing to paying for the eviction itself. Okay, so under that you've got of course the signature, the Tahliye imza, which is your tenant's signature, and to the right of that you've got the signature area for the spouse of your tenant. Okay, their husband, their wife, their partner, what have you. And under that we have a little section for the witness of the Tahliye Taahhutnamesi, and like I said, this is usually your realtor. Okay, your realtor. Like I said, this document gives you, the landlords, huge powers. Okay, it protects you against Turkish law. It protects you against your tenant locking you in with the set lease agreement for 10 years straight. Okay, 10 years is a long time to be locked in with the same tenant here in Turkey, because things change. Okay, that could be suddenly 250% inflation. What are you going to do? You can only increase your rent amount by the inflation, okay, as much as the inflation. If the inflation is 60%, you cannot increase the rent for the next year more than 60% by law. And like I said, last year the Turkish government actually passed a law which forbid landlords from increasing the rent by more than 25%. Supposedly, Ankara government did this to kind of help the inflation situation in Turkey. Of course, sadly, it didn't really help the situation at all. But it did put a lot of landlords in a difficult spot because they couldn't really match the inflation rates in their rental income. So also a lot of tenants actually take advantage of the system. They basically sign a weak lease agreement with their landlords, and then they kind of lock their landlords in with a very low rent for years. Like I said, the law protects the tenants, not the landlords. So you have to take care of yourself, your own interests as the landlord. You have to have your tenants sign this. If they're not agreeing to signing a lease, Tahliye Taahhutnamesi, then you probably don't want to lease to that person. Okay, you probably want to find another person that who's willing to sign that, because it's basically like, look, they're not really losing anything. Okay, they're basically saying that they're going to be moving out when they're saying that they're going to move out. Okay, on the lease agreement, you're going to have a move out date, so you can have your Tahliye Taahhutnamesi match that date. It's basically going to be forcing your tenant to actually move out on that date. Now, you don't have to, of course, enforce your Tahliye Taahhutnamesi. If you're happy with your tenant, if you're happy with, you know, they're taking care of your property, if you're happy with the rent, with the amount of rent that you're getting, then of course, I mean, you don't have to force your tenant to move out. You don't have to enforce your Tahliye Taahhutnamesi. But remember, if when the date of the move out date approaches, you have to consider whether you're going to be extending the lease, and if you're going to extend the lease, then once the time comes to renew that lease, also renew your Tahliye Taahhutnamesi. So you have to keep that in mind, because otherwise it will expire, and then your tenant might, you know, if the next year after renewing your lease agreement for one time we have problems with your tenant, then they can object to, you know, the Tahliye Taahhutnamesi that's already past due. So you along with your lease, you're gonna want to renew your Tahliye Taahhutnamesi as well. And I guess for introduction, this is kind of enough. Like I said, it's a really big topic. I mean, I'm not going to delve into the details of this in this video, but we're going to discuss those in future videos. So I hope this was an interesting, informative, educational video for you. I hope you learned something. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please go ahead and subscribe as well. I'd really appreciate that. I would love you for that. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask your questions in the comment section. If I'm also going to include my email address, if you can shoot me an email as well, especially with you know, private information or confidential, or, you know, or to hire me. I have that as well as an option. And thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.